Okay, so let's talk about one of the most important parts of a homestead. And that's, how do I get food all year round? Well, I can either grow food all year round, I can have my animals produce food all year round, or I can preserve them. Today we're going to be talking about how to preserve this. Milk. Turning it into this. Cheese. Using a cheese cave. Let's go.
Life moves a little slower, Alabama, I'm coming home.
Alright, as I said in the intro, one of the important parts about having a homestead or a farm is being able to have food all year round. And in terms of milk, I can either have multiple milk cows and I offset their breeding pattern or their breeding cycle, so I continually have a cow or a sheep or a goat in milk, or I can try and preserve that milk, or I can do both. So I prefer doing both. One, because I love cheese. Cheese is delicious, especially nice, stinky cheese with a lot of mold in and on it. Oh, delicious. Can't beat it, especially with a nice glass of red wine. But one of the important parts of being able to make a delicious cheese like that is I need to be able to age it. So there are two types of cheese. I can either make a fresh cheese like a mozzarella or a ricotta or a farm cheese, where I just acidify the milk, throw the rennet in it, and then boom, the curds separate and I'm just eating fancy curds. Or I can knead the curds in the case of mozzarella and get a different texture than just a curdy cheese, kind of like a ricotta. But if I want to make a nice, delicious, stinky, soft, or a hard cheese, I need a cheese cave. The whole point of a cheese cave is to get the ideal environment for the right types of mold and bacteria to grow, to where I'm also not drying out the cheese so it cracks and becomes nasty. So the ideal temperature for a cheese cave and the ideal humidity for a cheese cave varies wildly depending upon what type of cheese you're making. You could need 45 degrees Fahrenheit on the temperature. I'm not quite sure what that is in centigrade. Or you can need 65 degrees Fahrenheit, which once again, I'm not entirely sure what that is centigrade. Humidity, I could need 80 to 85% humidity, or I could need 90 to 95% humidity. All those different factors are going to affect ultimately what type of cheese that you get. The more humid the environment, the more slowly the moisture is going to come out of the cheese. The temperature is going to affect what type of mold grows on the cheese, as well as what type of mold's in the environment itself. Some molds grow better at better temperatures. Like where I live, 72 degrees is like the prime temperature for black mold. And I live in a very humid, hot environment, so pretty much everything is always 72 degrees, 80 to 90% humidity, and if you're not paying attention, you'll get black mold like that, and oh, it does great things for the sinuses, and by great things, the horrible things. But anyway, I'm digressing. You don't need to know about my seasonal and long-term allergies. Love cheese. So the cheese cave is a very important step. Let me rephrase that. The aging process is a very important step in preserving cheeses, especially because it's your hard cheeses which are going to have the longer shelf life than your short cheeses like mozzarella or ricotta, which don't have much difference of a shelf life than milk. Nothing beats fresh squeezed milk. So there are different parts. The whole cheese making process affects what type of cheese you have. From what type of bacteria you use is going to affect the flavor, how big or small you cut the curds, how you put the rind, or how you form the rind, if you even do form a rind. How thick that rind's going to be. All of these things affect the cheese. But the aging process is where you really get the delicious flavors and consistency of cheeses. So that's the important thing with a cheese cave, being able to hold and maintain a temperature and humidity anywhere from 45 degrees up to 65 degrees, 80% humidity up to like 95% humidity is the general range which your cheese cave is going to be able to need to do. If you live in a hot, humid area like I do, stick around and I'm going to show you how I made my cheese cave. Delicious. Okay, so how did I make a cheese cave? Well, I live in the Gulf Coast. It's very hot, it's very humid, and I have to go really deep in the ground in order to actually get to sufficient temperatures to age cheese. So I did it. Instead of using nature, I tried to beat nature into submission using a refrigerator. So I took an old refrigerator that I got really cheap, and I added a humidity controller and a temperature controller onto the refrigerator itself, because a refrigerator's temperature is too cold for aging cheese. Same thing with, you need a way to be able to get the humidity up and keep the humidity. So the refrigerator is plugged directly into my temperature controller. So the refrigerator only has power when my temperature gets within the margin that I set. I have mine set for 55, so it'll kick on at about 0.4 degrees Fahrenheit and chill it down to 50 and then let it go back up 5. I did that mainly so the refrigerator won't continually cycle and I can hopefully preserve my compressor a little bit longer. And then inside the refrigerator itself, I have my probe for my temperature controller and my humidity controller, and I have the hose coming down from my humidifier and wood slats for my cheese. And a water collection system just so I can help, the bulk of water will help keep the humidity some, and whatever drips down from my humidifier is collected and I can reuse it. Now, up in the actual refrigerator is where I keep my humidifier. I use a reptile fogger. I had an extra one laying around. And if you'll notice, I have holes drilled into the top of my freezer unit. I did that for multiple purposes. One, the way in which a refrigerator like this works is all of the cooling elements, the evaporator specifically, is up in the freezer box. The freezer gets really cold and then it blows that cold air down into the refrigerator to actually keep the fridge warm. Refrigerators have something called a defrost cycle to prevent this, the evaporator, from freezing up with ice. So since my cheese cave is not, or my refrigerator I use for the cheese cave is not continually plugged in, I'm not entirely sure if the refrigerator is going to be able to have sufficient time or power to go through its defrost cycle, preventing my evaporator from freezing up. Evaporator freezes up, fridge don't work. Fridge don't work, cheese goes bad. And that's no good for no one, or anyone if you want to be grammatically proper, which I live in the South, so I don't. So one, I want my freezer compartment to be above freezing. That way, when the evaporator gets really cold and starts to accumulate ice, it will have time for any ice accumulation to melt and drip off of my evaporator so it continues to work. The second is I want maximum space in the actual refrigerator for as much cheese as I can possibly get. I don't want a humidifier taking up room. So I want to keep my humidifier up in the actual freezer compartment that I'm not using to age cheese in. I don't need my water supply for my humidifier to freeze up, because then the humidifier don't work, cheese goes bad, and I'm SOL. So this is how I turned a residential refrigerator into a cheese cave, using temperature controllers, slight modifications to the fridge, and adding some stuff, some wood slats to the actual fridge itself. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something about the importance of a cheese cave, a little bit about the parameters you need for it, and how you can make one using an old refrigerator. Please hit that like button, subscribe, and look forward to seeing you back for more content like this.